When a brutal winter storm sweeps across the frontier, lonely rancher Elias Warren discovers a wounded Apache woman near death in the snow. Saving Aiyana pulls him into a world of danger, loyalty, and forbidden connection. As she heals, trust grows between them, fragile at first, then powerful enough to break through grief and silence. But the men who tried to kill her are still hunting, drawing violence to Elias's doorstep. Together, they must stand against the dangers of the Wild West and the scars of their pasts, forging a love strong enough to reshape their lives, and the land around them. A bitter wind swept across the Arizona frontier, cutting through the cottonwoods and rolling like a blade over frozen earth. Snow clouds pressed low against the sky, promising a storm so fierce it could swallow the land whole. On the edge of the wilderness, Elias Warren tightened the last tie on his barn door, glancing toward the mountains as a wall of white moved steadily closer. He had lived alone on this ranch for 3 long winters, ever since fever took his wife and left him with only memory and silence for company. His days had become a simple cycle: work, eat, sleep, each sunrise blending into the next, each night ending in the same empty cabin. His cottage of pine logs, fitted with a stone chimney, stood like a stubborn relic against the elements. He had built it with Martha's laughter echoing in his ears, but now only the creak of wood and distant howl of wind kept him company. As the first snowflakes spiraled down, thick and heavy, Elias shut the last latch and hurried toward the cabin. The air had the fierce bite of a storm about to break, and by the time he lit the lamps inside, the world outside had vanished into a swirling white void. For a full day and night, the blizzard raged with a wild fury that felt almost personal. Snow heaped against the windows and buried his fences. The wind clawed at the cabin as if trying to wrench the logs apart. Inside, Elias did what he always did in storms: stocked the fire, fixed broken tools, ate little, slept less. He felt an old ache settle in his chest, a loneliness that storms always stirred up, as if the world was reminding him how small he was, how easily things could be taken. By the second morning, the storm's roar had softened to a ghostly moan. Elias rose stiffly and cleared a circle of frost from the window. Outside, the world gleamed like a frozen dream, white, blinding, and utterly still. He saw nothing but drifts, cottonwoods, and sunlight dancing on ice, until a shadow caught his eye. At first it seemed like a log half buried in snow near the tree line. Then he noticed the strange angle, the unnatural stillness. A tightness formed in his gut. Out here, anything unexpected usually meant danger: outlaws, starving animals, desperate men. Or worse, something tied to the tense relations between settlers and tribal families who'd lived on this land long before him. He tried to ignore it. He tried to walk away. But then Martha's voice, the one he hadn't heard in years except in memory, rose gently inside him: "Don't ever turn your back on someone who needs help." He cursed softly, grabbed his heaviest coat, slung his old rifle over his shoulder, and forced the cabin door open again. The snow swallowed him to his waist. Each step toward the dark shape was a battle, the cold biting into his beard, his breath fogging in harsh bursts. When he reached the figure, the truth struck him with alarming clarity. It was a woman, young, dressed in fringed buckskin, decorated with beadwork that glimmered faintly beneath frost. She belonged to one of the nearby Apache bands, though he couldn't guess which. She lay partly on her side, nearly entombed by snow. Fear shot through him. If he touched her, her people might think he'd caused her harm. If he walked away, she would die within minutes. Neither choice felt safe, but one felt right. He dropped to his knees, brushing snow from her face. Her skin was chilled so deeply it was hard to believe she lived, until he found a faint, fluttering pulse near her throat. Her breath was shallow and fragile. As he moved her carefully, his glove came away smeared with something dark. Blood. An arrow shaft, broken and protruding from her side, had been hidden beneath the snow. This was no accident. Someone had hunted her down, or she'd been caught in violence between rival groups. Elias looked around instinctively, heart pounding, but saw only the stillness of snow. Whoever had done this was gone. Leaving her wasn't an option anymore. He fashioned a crude sling out of his coat and looped it under her shoulders. The drag back to the cabin was agonizing. Snow dragged at her legs. His boots slipped on unseen ice. Every few feet he stopped to catch his breath, praying she still drew her own. When he finally reached the cabin door, sweat dripped down his back beneath his cold clothes. Inside, he laid her near the fire, coaxing the embers into bright flames. He worked quickly, cutting her frozen buckskin garment away from her wound. Her skin had that terrifying cold stiffness of someone hovering between life and death. He buried her under every blanket he possessed, then gently warmed her hands and feet with heated cloths. Gradually her chest began to rise more steadily, though the fever hadn't yet come. It would. The arrow wound was deep. The broken shaft had left the stone point lodged beneath her ribs. Infection was already brewing, the angry swell of flesh made that clear. Elias paced the small cabin, his thoughts racing. He had learned to mend himself through years of ranch accidents, but this was far beyond anything he'd faced. Removing the arrowhead could save her, or kill her. Night fell. Her fever rose like fire. She muttered fevered words in her own language, sharp syllables rolling off her tongue in panic. He stayed beside her, cooling her forehead, whispering soothing nonsense just to anchor her drifting mind. Hours later, her eyes fluttered open. They were dark, clear, full of pain and fear. She tried to speak, her voice a brittle whisper. Elias raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Safe," he murmured softly. "You're safe here." He pointed to himself. Elias. Then to her wound. Then to the arrowhead heating in the firelight. He mimicked pulling something free. She blinked at him, her gaze heavy with fever but understanding. After several moments, she gave a faint nod. "This will hurt," he whispered. The extraction was brutal. Her cry pierced the cabin. She arched against the floorboards as he pulled steady and strong, praying he wouldn't tear an artery. At last, the arrowhead slid free with a slick, sickening sound. Blood poured out. Panic jolted him, but he pressed herbal compresses against the wound, holding pressure until the bleeding slowed. When it was done, she went limp, unconscious. Elias sagged beside her, trembling with exhaustion. But she was alive. As the storm faded and sunlight returned to the mountains, Elias believed the worst had passed. He was wrong. Elias barely slept the first night after saving the wounded woman. Every few minutes he checked her breathing, terrified the shallow rise of her chest might stop. In the pale glow of dawn, she lay still but alive, her fever softened, her skin no longer icy. The arrowhead he had pulled out lay on his work table, a jagged piece of stone stained dark, silent proof that someone had meant to end her life. By midday her strength flickered back like an ember refusing to die. Her eyelids twitched, then slowly opened. Elias felt a surge of relief so sharp it almost knocked the breath from him. "You're safe," he said softly, careful not to crowd her. She blinked, studying him with guarded eyes. There was fear there, yes, but also curiosity. Mistrust was expected. He was a stranger. A settler. And she'd nearly died. He offered her water in a wooden cup. She hesitated, nostrils flaring as she tested its scent. Then she drank slowly. Her voice finally scraped out in a hoarse whisper, short, clipped words in her own language. Elias shook his head, apologetic. "I don't understand." After a moment she tried English instead, the accent sharp, the words careful. "My name is Aiyana." Elias repeated it softly. "Aiyana. You're safe here. I found you in the snow." She listened, eyes narrowing as she absorbed his words. When he gestured to the wound at her side, she touched it gently and winced, but there was no anger toward him, only pain and a deep weariness. "You took arrow," she murmured. "Thank you." He nodded, then stepped back to give her space. He cooked a thin stew, offered it to her, and was surprised when she ate slowly but fully. Strength returned to her limbs inch by inch. As days passed, she began sitting up, then taking small steps around the cabin with his shoulder for support. But recovery wasn't the only thing growing between them. They spoke in bits and pieces, trading the simplest words. Elias told her about the ranch, about Martha, about the winters that had carved him hollow. Aiyana shared little, only that she came from a band several miles east, and that trouble had been brewing among different groups fighting for land and honor. She never said who shot her. Only that the arrow was not from her own people. Silence filled the spaces between them, but it was a different kind of silence than Elias had grown used to, warm, gentle, alive with unspoken understanding. Sometimes they shared the same firelight without speaking at all, the quiet of the cabin no longer a burden but a balm. Aiyana was nothing like Martha, yet in the same breath everything Elias thought he'd lost, strength, gentleness, stubborn courage. He found himself watching her without meaning to, noticing how she moved like a whisper, how her eyes softened when she looked out at the mountains, how her laugh, rare but real, shifted the air inside the small cabin. One evening near the end of her healing, she spoke while he stitched a torn boot beside the fire. "You saved my life," she said suddenly, her voice steady now. "I did what anyone should," Elias replied. "Not many would help someone like me." The truth of her words hung heavy. Elias met her gaze. Not many know what it feels like to almost freeze alone. Something passed between them, gentle, painful, necessary. Aiyana lowered her eyes. "Your heart carries sorrow." He nodded. "Yours too." But peace was a luxury the frontier rarely allowed for long. 3 nights later, trouble found them. Elias woke to a faint hiss outside, snow shifting under boots. Not one pair. Several. He extinguished the lantern with a swift motion and pulled Aiyana behind him. She sensed danger immediately, her posture sharpening like a drawn bow. Voices murmured outside, 2 men, maybe 3. Then a heavy knock sounded against the cabin door. "Open up," a harsh voice barked. "We're looking for someone. Ain't leavin' till we get answers." Aiyana tensed. Her fingers dug into Elias's sleeve. He stepped toward the door but didn't open it. "Who's out there?" "Travelers," the man replied with a mocking laugh. "We're searching for a woman. Injured one. Mighta wandered off. You seen her?" Elias didn't answer. The man's tone grew colder. "We know she came this way. We're looking to return her to her people." Aiyana shook her head violently. Her fear spoke louder than words ever could. Elias felt something old and fierce ignite inside him, something he thought had died with Martha. He turned back to the door. "Ain't no one here but me. Now get off my land." A tense silence followed. Then the man spat, "We'll come in and check for ourselves." The door handle rattled. Elias leveled his rifle with a slow, deadly calm. "You touch that door," he warned, "and I'll drop the first man through it." Silence again, this time heavier, darker. Finally, the boots backed away, crunching on snow. Low voices argued, and then, slowly, the footsteps retreated into the distance. Elias waited long after the sound had vanished before lowering the rifle. Aiyana stared at him, eyes shimmering with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "They want me dead," she whispered. "Not to take me home." "I know," he said quietly. "And they won't get you." Her voice trembled. "Why help me? Why risk your life?" Elias swallowed hard. "Because your life matters. Because I couldn't lose another soul in the snow." Aiyana stepped closer, placing a hand over his heart, light as falling ash. "Your spirit is strong," she said softly. "But lonely." Elias's voice broke. "Not anymore." Winter slowly loosened its grip on the land. Snow melted into clear streams. Pines shed their icy coats. Aiyana grew strong enough to walk miles again, to laugh without wincing, to breathe deep and free. Yet something rooted her to Elias's cabin. And something in him refused to imagine the ranch without her. One warm evening, as the last light spilled across the valley, Aiyana reached for his hand. "I can return to my people now," she said gently. "But my path has changed." Elias braced himself, heart pounding. "Changed how?" She smiled, a soft, trembling smile. "If you will have me. I wish to stay." Relief, joy, and disbelief struck him all at once. "I want nothing more," he whispered. That spring, two hearts once broken by the world found a home in each other. Together they rebuilt the ranch, guided by both her traditions and his. The nearby Apache families came to know Elias as a man of honor, one who protected rather than threatened. The settlers who once whispered about him now respected him again. In time, the ranch became a sanctuary, a place where two cultures found peace, where wounded travelers found food, warmth, and safety. And in that place of new beginnings, Elias and Aiyana built a life shaped by love, courage, and the storm that had saved them both.